Hi everyone, welcome again to the Things virtual conference. We're very happy that you have joined us for our LoRaWAN workshop, and it's going to be extremely practical. I'm Elisabeth, I'm the founder and CEO of ECBM, and we are a digital problem solver. That means we use digital technologies to solve real-world problems, and a lot of these technologies at the moment focus around the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. Specifically, we do a lot of projects with LoRaWAN. I think some of you have a lot of experience already with making LoRaWAN work, and some of you look at it more from a business perspective. And this workshop is actually targeted at those who are newbies to making LoRaWAN use cases work in a technical manner. We're going to explain things step by step, how you can make your first simple LoRaWAN application work. The use case we're going to look at today is how to control your room climate via TTN and the ThingsBoard, with TTN as the LoRa server and ThingsBoard as the front end. So we're going to explain the device that we're using. It's not the only device that can do this, obviously. There are a lot of them out there. One of them is the Tactelic that was in the workshop kit advertised by the Things Network. And we're going to explain the whole chain of the data from the backend to the database to the decoding of what's actually coming from the sensor and to making it look pretty on a front end. Okay, what do you need for today's workshop? First and most important thing you need is an account with the Things Network. So if you haven't done it in the past, go on and go to the Things Network website and register yourself. Then you need some hardware, obviously either this one or the Tactelic one that was in the workshop package, advertised by the Think conference. And you also need an Android smartphone. So if you haven't got one, maybe your friend has one that you can use for this workshop. And you need the app from Elsys, or there's an equivalent from Tactelic as well. And you need a front end. In this case, we're working with ThingsBoard. The very basic version of ThingsBoard is free, but for the integration with TTN, we need the professional version, which is $10 a month. So, what have we got here? This is a very simple indoor climate sensor. Main functions, temperature and humidity. It's absolutely fine if you want to know whether you should or shouldn't open the window in your office. When the guys and the girls are fighting again, whether it's too warm or not, you can use this to actually put some objective facts into that discussion. It's very nice because it lasts very long. Battery lasts up to 10 years, depending on how you configure it. If you configure it to send every 5 minutes, the battery won't last 10 years, but you can make it last up to 10 years if you put in a reasonable configuration. So, enough PowerPoint for today. Let's dive into actually creating our first LoRaWAN use case. Alright, let's start registering our first sensor on TTN. Before we do that, we have to create an application. We click on Applications, and then there's a list of old test applications that I've used, and let's create a new one. Here's a little button called Add Application, and the first thing I have to enter is an application ID. The application ID has to be unique on the whole TTN, but it can generally be what I want it to be. So let's test if this one already exists. Room climate ERS light, which is something that I can actually understand. That's very useful. I can put a description if I want to. I can not give it my own application EUI, because that will be issued by the Things Network. The application EUI is the destination of my sensor data. So if I create 10 applications for my use, I will have 10 different application EUIs, and this is where the data from the different sensors will go. So I add the application. Now someone was faster than me, and room climate ERS light already exists. So get creative. I call it room climate ERS light 1. Here we go. It has been created successfully. And now I have to register a device with this application. Here under devices, there's at the moment 0 registered devices. And so I'm going to register one, this one. So the first thing it wants is the device ID. The device ID is again something that I write for myself to understand. So if I use just one ERS light, then I can call it ERS light. But if I use them in multiple places, like one in Office 1 and another one in my living room, then I should give them names that actually reflect where they are. This does not have to be unique across the TTN, just unique in my application. So, the device EUI. This I cannot invent. This has to be the one from this device. This is the technical identification number, and it has to be unique. And for a lot of devices, like this one, it's printed on the back. Other devices, it's sometimes printed on the front. But it's always somewhere on the device. It's not security relevant, so it's no problem to actually print it on the device. So I have to type and make no mistakes now. Right, I don't have to give it an app key for now, and the app EUI is already pre-filled. Register. And here we go. So, I have successfully registered my first EIS Lite device on my application in the Things network. Now my data has some place to go from the sensor. So now that I have registered my sensor, I have to configure it on an app. The app currently only runs on Android devices, and it's called Sensor Settings. And this is roughly what it looks like. So what I have to do is I have to, first of all, select the correct sensor type. This one is an EIS Lite. However, you can also register any other kind of ELSYS sensors. This is the app from the company ELSYS. Other companies obviously have other sensors as well. And in the app, there are quite a few options to configure. First of all, you can configure the time base, which is the frequency with which the sensor communicates its data. So if you want long battery life, you tell it to send data not so often. If you are really interested in measuring a lot of data over a certain period of time, you can always change this configuration. Like, for example, if you have a new room where you want, or a new heating system, and you want to know how it works, then hey, configure the thing to send every 5 minutes for a few days, and then you put it back to less frequency. Then you can also individually configure how often some of the data in the actual sensor is sent. It can send its battery life, humidity, temperature, and for each of those you can individually set up how often it's supposed to send them. Then what is really important is the sensor keys and how the sensors are actually activated. This runs on over-the-air activation, which is one of the authentication methods in LoRaWAN. The other one is ABP. OTAA, over-the-air activation, is definitely more secure, so that's what we always recommend to use the moment you leave any kind of prototyping and playing around scenario. In this case, we use OTAA anyway, even though it's a playing around scenario. So here it needs the dev EUI, which is directly from the sensor. It's on the back. And also, when you put the sensor and the phone next to each other, when the sensor is switched on, then it will ask you if it's supposed to update the database. You say yes, and then the dev EUI from the sensor is automatically written into the app. So, also what you need here is the app EUI. And the app EUI is what you get here from your the Things Network application. Because this will then the sensor will actually know where to send the data. The third piece of information that you need for over-the-air activation is the app key. And the app key comes here from the Things Network. And it's shown as little dots because it's a very security relevant piece of information. Whoever has the app key has the power and can basically decode the information that is coming from the sensor. And therefore, I'm not going to remove the little dots. You have to write your app key into this and update the sensor with the information from here. So, after pressing the right button, the sensor registers on the TTN network with the application that we have told it to register with the app EUI. And now what we can see, here we can see some data. So, this sensor is currently it's set to sending every 30 seconds, which is not something that you would normally do, but for trying out and for getting some test data, that makes a lot of sense. So now we can actually see some funny numbers here. The funny numbers is what is called a payload, and it's hexadecimal, and this is basically the encoded message from our sensor to us, which contains a lot of interesting data, like temperature, humidity, battery status, that sort of thing. So now we have some beautiful data here represented in hexadecimal values, and I can't read hexadecimal values as they are written here, so I need something which helps me to decode the values, which is a decoder. Most of the sensor manufacturers have their own payload decoders because they structure their data in a slightly different way. So here, if I click on one of the uplinks, so one of the bits of information from the sensor, I can copy the payload, hit the copy button here, and go to the ELSIS decoder, which is publicly available on elsis.se/en for English /elsis-payload. And then, first of all, it shows you how to write your own decoders. You can write the decoder in JavaScript. You can write the decoder in the Things network. So all the code is here. But what is the easiest thing to do is you put in the payload that you've just copied, and you go convert. Right, and now we've got some values. That's great. So the first value is the temperature. 25 degrees in the room which we are in currently. It's pretty warm. 26% humidity. That's not a lot. And it also gives us, in this case, we have a slightly bigger sensor than the original one. It gives us some more information, how bright it is in this room, if there's any motion, and the CO2 value as well. So this is not all included in the EIS Lite. This is the slightly bigger version of the EIS sensor that gives you a little bit more information. So we have decoded a payload and we got a lot of information. Okay, so now we did a one-time decoding of one particular payload. But that's not what we necessarily want for the long term. We want to be able to constantly decode the messages that come in from the sensor. So we're going to copy the Things Network payload decoder, which is on this page, and we're going to put it where it belongs, into our application. This is quite a simple thing to do. You just click somewhere in here. On an Apple, it's Command A for copying everything. On Windows, it's Control A. And then it's Command or Control C. So you copied everything. Then we go back to the Things Network console. And right now, we're still in the device overview. And now we have to go back to our application. Up here, you have the menu. This is our device. And this Room Climate EIS Lite 1 is our application. So we click on the application. And here we have a little menu, the overview, which is where we are now, the devices, which is where we would find this guy, and then we have the payload formats. And here we have a decoder function. There's already a very, very basic decoder function in here, but that's not going to be enough to get us the data from our sensor. So ELSIS have written their own, and if you select this, delete it, and then Command V or Control V, put in what we've just copied, then we've got the whole ELSIS decoder sitting in here. And now we can test. First of all, we save, and then we can test if this actually works. So successfully saved the payload decoder, and now we get ourselves a payload from our EIS Lite device. We pick the latest one, copy it. And I want to test if the decoder actually works. So I stick in the payload, test. Here we go. I've got my CO2, my humidity, my light, my motion, my temperature, and my battery power. So that's how you actually register a device on the Things Network and get it to give you some sensible, human-readable data. Now comes the pretty bit. The front end, which actually visualizes the data and makes it look nice. And the guy who's absolutely the perfect person for this is Aaron in my team. He's a data scientist and front-end developer, and his day job is actually to make data, present data in a way that humans can easily understand it. So Aaron, so that you can do your work, I'm going to hand over the application ID and the device ID to you, so that you can actually show the device on ThingsBoard.
Okay, while Elisabeth is securely sending over the details we need for the integration, between the device on the Things Network and ThingsPort. Let's take a look at ThingsPort. It's an open source IoT platform that allows you to manage and organize your devices, gather the data from the devices, and then visualize them so you can then visually analyze and explore them using dashboards. We'll go into the creation of an example dashboard for our newly registered device in a bit. First, I'd like to mention that there are two different editions of ThingsPort. So there's a community edition and a professional edition. They have different options. You can find information regarding that on thingsport.io/products. And obviously the community edition also has some cost to it. The professional edition has some cost to it. So you can find information regarding that on thingsport.io/pricing. For the integration between the Things Network and ThingsPort, you will need the professional edition. Okay, that being said, let's take a look at the ThingsPort and the main menu first. And we can then go, once we have the information, we can then go take a look at the integration, and afterwards we'll create an example dashboard, as I mentioned. Okay, so let's get started by logging into ThingsPort Professional, and we first see the welcome screen, the home screen, with the main menu on the left side. There we have the home, which is where we're at right now, and rule chains, which is where you can create or define the behavior of what should happen once data reaches ThingsPort. So let's say you want to compare your measurements with a certain threshold. This is where you would create a rule chain and there you can implement exactly that logic. We'll go into data converters and integrations in a bit, once we have the details we need for that. In roles, you can define access roles, permission roles. So this is where you would generally create the setup. And then in customer hierarchy, you can create several customers per ThingsPort tenant. In users, you can then define users and create users. So let's say you want to give someone access to your platform. This is where you would create a user for them, so they could have it, in this example, as a read-only user. Let's see what else we have here. Let's go in asset groups, for example. This is where you can create so-called assets. An asset now would be, let's say, a building where you have three different types of sensors or three different sensors, and you want to group them by building. Then you could create an asset and call it building A, and then assign all these different devices to this one building. In device groups, this is where you will find all your devices. So you can then again create lists and group them by, let's say, device types. So if we wanted to have all Things Network devices in one group, we could just create one group with Things Network devices. In Widgets library, this is now the visual part of ThingsPort. These are, we'll go into them again later. This is where you have predefined widgets that allow you to show the data actually, and this is also where you can extend the functionality of ThingsPort by creating your own custom widgets using any JavaScript library you want. Right. Now, what else do we have? Dashboard groups. Dashboard groups, this is where now you can again create groups to group your dashboards by. So I already created one group, called it TTN dashboards. So this is where we'll create the dashboard in a second. Scheduler allows you to run scheduled tasks. So if you want to export your dashboard on a daily business, for example, or let's say an hourly business, whatever, this is where you can set that up. White labeling allows you to change the appearance of your ThingsPort, and audit logs, as the name says, pretty much provides information about who did what and when on your platform. So in the meantime, I received the required information, so let's head over to data converters and create these first. So we'll need two data converters in total. One we'll call Things Network uplink converter. It's type uplink, that's correct. And if you activate debug mode here, you can then see incoming and outgoing messages, but we'll leave that off for now. Expand this. There's an example decoder here, which helps you to get started. We, of course, prepared one for this use case where we return two telemetry fields, data fields, called temperature and humidity. So now we'll click add, and this is the first part, the uplink converter. Next, we'll add the downlink converter. So we'll go TTN downlink converter. Type is downlink, and again here we'll replace this part with something we prepared. So this is the downlink converter. Now we'll click add again. So now we have the up and the downlink converters set up. Next we head over to integrations, and this is where we can now use them to create the actual Things Network integration. So we'll call it Things Network integration type. Now this is where we can choose from all sorts of integration ThingsBoard offers. And if we scroll down a little bit, we'll find the Things Network. So uplink data converter, this is now where we can choose the one we just created. Same with downlink converter. And we have to choose a region. This, in our case, is the EU. And now here in application ID and in access key, this is where we'll add the information which Elisabeth created on the Things Network and just sent to me. So application ID is room climate here as light 1. And the access key, I'll copy that in the background. So I'll paste it here. And now we can click add. And the next time the device sends something, you can now head over to the device groups. The next time the device sends something, it will show up in this tab, and we'll see this here. So we'll jump in time a little bit to the next time the device sends something. So as expected, the next time the device sent data to the Things Network, it was forwarded to ThingsBoard. The converters and the integration worked fine, so a new device was created with the name ERS Light and the type room climate ERS Light 1. So we now know that the integration we're using here is working fine and the data is ending up in ThingsBoard. Okay, so after we waited for a bit, we have some measurements that were sent from the sensor to the Things Network and then forwarded to ThingsBoard. So we can now use it to create a dashboard. Therefore, we go over to Dashboard Groups, the Things Network, and here I create a little template which we can use to visualize the sensor data. So this is the basic layout of the dashboard I would like to create now. So we will have a temperature and humidity curve, as well as the current temperature and the current humidity. We can go into full screen mode here. So now, first of all, to get the data now to the dashboard, we will go into the edit mode and create so-called aliases, which allow us to query the data from the system and get it to the dashboard here. So I click on this little button here. Now add alias, and we'll call it room sensors. Now you have a whole lot of different options to query the data. So for example, you can just query a single entity or all other different types of queries, which you would need if you want to have a more elaborate dashboard. And this allows you to query in all different ways. But for now, we'll stick with the single entity because we only have this one sensor and it's a device. Also here again, you'll find some of the structure again, which we went over in the main menu. So we will select device, and here we have our ERS light sensor. So we select it and click add, and now we have an alias called room sensors. We save this and we apply changes. So let's go ahead and go into edit mode again. And now let's create some widgets. So we'll click on add new widgets, and this opens the widget selection menu here, where we can choose from different bundles. So this is where the widgets are grouped by widget type. So you have all different kinds of charts, cards, control widgets, etc. And also this is where you can find your custom widgets. For now, let's stick with charts, and we want to visualize the time series. You can also create latest values. So there's a bunch of visualizations options here too. So we want to create the temperature and humidity curve first. So you have a little preview here of what the chart would look like. and we'll go with a line chart. And now here we can use the data source, or alias we created room sensors, and we find the two data keys, humidity and temperature. So now we can click add, and this will create our first widget here. We can drag it to change the size, and then apply changes again to save the changes. Okay, let's go right ahead with the next two widgets. We want still. Okay, let's continue to create two more widgets for the current temperature and current humidity. We click add widget here and then create new widget. So for the temperature, there is a nice little template that has like a thermometer, and we click on analog gauges and then latest values, and there we have this visualization which is pretty nice for temperatures. So we can again click room sensors for our data source, and now we of course only choose temperature, and now we click add. This gives us the latest value of our temperature sensor, which we can again adapt to fit the size here and apply changes, and now this shows us the current temperature. Let's add one more widget for the current humidity. Again, add new widget, create new widget, and go to digital gauges, which are also here. Just to give you a little overview of what is possible. So these are all the predefined widgets you can choose from. Let's go with this type, for example, for the humidity. Again, we add our alias room sensors, and now we choose the key humidity and click on add, and we get a little humidity widget down here, and we fit it to the size. And that's it for now. So this is how quickly you can create widgets and have some basic visualizations of your data on ThinkSport. Of course, there's a lot you can do to style this now and make it even better visually. So to style the charts, we go into edit mode again, and here we now have the little pencil again to edit this widget. So we'll start with this one and go to settings. So this data tab is where we set up the initial data connection, and now in settings we can change settings like the title, and we'll call it temperature and humidity curve. Yep. And we remove the drop shadow, and this is also where you can style like the background, the text color, and all sorts of styling. So there's a lot you can do. Let's see what it looks like for now, and close this here. Temperature and humidity curve, that looks good to me. Let's continue with the current temperature. So again, here we go into settings, and we'll call it current temperature. We'll set the option to display the title. Remove the drop shadow, and one more thing I would like to change is the setting here. And now we can save it. So we have the current temperature, and we change the humidity as well. So we go to settings. Now we put in current humidity, remove the drop shadow, display the title. And there's one more thing I would like to change here. So also here in the data keys, you can go into edit mode, and you can define, for example, that you don't want any digits after the floating point, and we want to put in the symbol %. So now we save it and we apply it. So now we have the humidity without zeros here and % sign. So now we click apply changes again, and we are done. This is our dashboard created with ThinkSport, showing temperature and humidity curve as well as current values.
Thanks very much, Aaron. This looks great. And we have now completed the whole chain of getting data from the sensor through the network onto the network server into a database and visualizing it in a front end. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you were able to build the application together with us. We will post the whole instruction on our website so that you can at any time look at the details again and play around with your first LoRaWAN use case. There are a lot more complicated use cases. There's a lot of value in putting different use cases together into one big application, but this is a great starter, and I hope it helped you to understand the technology and how we use the technology and what value it brings better. So please visit ecbm.me for further information. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to ask us right now. We're very happy to help you.